Before we get to this story of healing, I want us to, if we could, consider the Old Testament. This long book, it's the Hebrew Scriptures. The Old Testament is an incomplete story. It does not have an ending. It is lacking something in the story. It doesn't find its conclusion. They have the ups and the downs, God's people. God reaches out long ago to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, these forefathers of the faith. He partners with them. He wants to connect with humanity. He wants to bring salvation, and it's going to come through this family that would grow to a nation. They make their way into Egypt where they grow and multiply. Eventually they're rescued out of Egypt because they were enslaved by the mighty Egyptians. They're rescued out of Egypt. They're brought into the wilderness. And for the wilderness and for 40 years, they really become who they are as a people. They receive the instructions for the law, for the building of the tabernacle, God's dwelling place with them, that they might stand apart from the rest of the world, for the sacrificial system. All these things come to them in the wilderness. They still, of course, have their ups and their downs. They're doing some things well and other things poorly. Maybe you can relate. They finally get out of the wilderness and they make their way to the long-awaited promised land. And they get to the promised land where they still do things good and yet many things not so good. They're ruled by a series of judges. They're supposed to be righteous, but of course not all of them are righteous. And there's ups and downs, goods and bads. Finally, the kingly line begins with Saul and then King David and King Solomon. And things are looking up, but quickly, as good as they were, they tumble down. They fall down off a cliff, and the people are no longer a united kingdom for God. They have been divided. You now have the northern kingdom of Israel, the southern kingdom of Judah, and they have a series of many kings that rule over them, many of whom are wicked kings that lead them away from God, the very God that had saved them and rescued them and had called them to be set apart to represent God to the nations, and they have failed over and over again through idolatry, through injustice. The Old Testament is just up and down and up and down. During this season of time is when God sends the Hebrew prophets to say, hey, remember what God has said. Remember the word of the Lord. Remember the law He has given us. Remember the heart of God and what we are called to do. Remember these things. The prophets tell the people over and over and over again. Finally, both the northern and southern kingdoms are overtaken. First, the northern kingdom of Israel by Assyria, and then later on, about 150 years later, the southern kingdom of Judah overtaken by Babylon, and they are wiped out, destroyed, but a small remnant remains, and they are sent 1,000 miles away, exiled to Babylon, fearful that they would never return to their city that has now been destroyed, and a temple that has now been destroyed, and the walls that are knocked down, and it's one of the low points in the story of the Old Testament. Some 70 years later, King Cyrus of Persia rises to power and grants that the Israelites, these Judahites, can return back to Jerusalem and rebuild. And so they do rebuild the city. They rebuild the temple, though not as grand as it once was. And yet, as soon as they've returned, it's not so much long after that they once again begin to venture away from God. Idolatry and injustice. Lured away and doing things they're not supposed to do, following gods they're not supposed to follow, living in a way that's not loving and kind to their neighbor, performing injustices. And so about 80 years after the return from exile is when the Old Testament ends, the narrative story. And so it's gone up and down and up and down, and it's almost as if it's ending down. In fact, I want to read to you the very final 2 verses from the final chapter of the final book of the Old Testament. This is Malachi, the prophet, who comes after the return from exile. These are the 2 verses in Malachi chapter 4. For behold, the day is coming, burning like an oven, when all the arrogant and all evildoers will be stubble. The day that is coming shall set them ablaze, says the Lord of hosts, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch. But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in its wings. Does this sound as though it's a story completed? It's the very final chapter of the Old Testament, and it's speaking of a day to come, the longing of a day to come when the evildoers are punished. This is, of course, still how the people are thinking. The evildoers are punished, and that the remnant, the ones that remain, the ones that stay faithful, the ones that says that fear God, that honor the Lord, will meet the Son of Righteousness with healing in its wings. It's a awaited promise. This is how the Old Testament ends. And so, of course, we know when we celebrate in this Easter season, of course, the new story that's to come. The new story of Jesus. Amen? And Jesus comes on the scene to, of course, change everything and open our eyes. So I want us to look at a story given to us in the Gospel of Mark today. It's two stories, really. Mark puts these stories together. One is kind of right in the middle of the other. And so it's the one story, and then you take a side venture. There's another story, and then the first story comes to a conclusion. He brings these stories together, I think, intentionally. And so we're going to look at both of them and take them in together, I believe, as we are supposed to do. In this sermon, you might, if you give it a title, it would be the two daughters. Two daughters that were looking for healing. So Jesus here in Matthew 5 is in full force with his ministry. Things are going full speed ahead. Jesus has begun healing people. He's begun teaching with authority. He's going from town to town and traveling and doing all these things. He's casting out demons. His fame is growing more and more, and he would travel from town to town. And leading up to our story today, he's just gone over the sea. This is the Sea of Galilee. And we say sea, it's almost like a lake. It's about 12 miles by 7 miles. But it's very diverse, and there's Gentile territory, and there's other races and religions and cultures all around this sea, and Jesus would travel from side to side. Many stories of Jesus on the boat with his disciples passing through the Sea of Galilee. And he's just returned from the other side of the sea back to his home base. His home base really is a city called Capernaum. He grows up in Nazareth, a small town, but he doesn't do much of his ministry there. The one time he goes there and preaches there, they try to stone him to death and throw him off a cliff. And so he doesn't return very often, you can imagine. Capernaum is his new headquarters. He calls some of the disciples. He's known there. He's getting a little more famous there. And he's just returned there, and great crowds are awaiting him. And amidst the crowds, there's this one man that runs up to Jesus upon the shore. We're told this man is named Jairus. And Jairus runs to Jesus, and he falls before Jesus, and he says, "Lord Jesus, I need healing for my daughter." His daughter is sick, we're told, sick on the brink of death, very, very ill, and could die at any moment. And I feel connected with this Jairus. I have a 12-year-old daughter right now. I'm just imagining the pain, the sorrow of a sick 12-year-old daughter that is on her deathbed. He runs to Jesus and asks for help. And I want us to see that Jairus took a risk in doing this. You see, Jairus was not just a common man. He was quite prominent in town. He was one of the leaders of the synagogue. The synagogue is the house of worship in the town where the Jews would come to read the Torah on the Sabbath and these type of things. It was almost like their church, if you want to think about it that way. And he was one of the leaders of the synagogue there. And so associated with the synagogue, of course, are all these Pharisees that we've talked about before many times. And the Pharisees were, in many ways, quite skeptical of Jesus. Jesus did not fit into their bubble. He didn't do things exactly how they thought he should do them. And so they were skeptical. They were hesitant. They kept Jesus at an arm's length. They didn't really welcome Jesus into their group. But if he would have come, they would have wanted him to, but he didn't. And they had this tension, the Pharisees. These are the circles. These are the people that Jairus is certainly working in and working with, the Pharisees. And he runs all the more to Jesus to ask for help. We're told in the New Testament, in fact, there are some people that would be put out of their synagogue if they confess faith in Jesus. And Jairus runs to Jesus anyway. What I love about this moment, of course, is that it shows the power of love over fear. Can I get an amen on that? We're still working on the amens. Love over fear. There's a lot of fear in what he did, a lot of fear of being excluded, of being outcast, of being pushed out of the synagogue, of losing his job, of losing a reputation with the Pharisees, and yet over all of that was the love of his beloved daughter. And he would do whatever he needed to do to get healing, salvation for her. Love over fear. Hold on to that. We're going to come back to that idea. Love triumphing over fear. Jesus, of course, in this moment immediately agrees to go with Jairus. Let's go, Jesus says. So they have to go from the shore up into town. It's not very far, but then through town and to the other side where Jairus' home is to get to his daughter that she might be healed. But remember, I want us to remember these crowds. Have you ever been in a hurry to get somewhere, but there's a traffic jam? It can be frustrating. I want us to think of this moment as that traffic jam. He's trying to get through the town, through the city streets, but it's just people crowded who are there to see and want to interact with Jesus, that have questions, that are interested in the healing or the preaching or the teaching, the casting out of the demons, all of these things. And people are crowded around Jesus, and they're working their way through the crowd, trying to get to Jairus' home before his daughter dies. In this moment, Jesus is approached by another woman. This woman, we're told, has a disease also. She's also quite ill. She suffers with an issue of blood, we're told. And she has been bleeding for 12 years. She's the very same age of this young daughter that Jesus is going to heal. For 12 years also, this woman has been bleeding. We're told that she spent all of her money to try to find healing. She spent all of her money on doctors, on healers, on medicine, on anything that she can get her hands on to bring healing, just as any of us would, by the way, to try to find healing for ourselves or someone that we love. And she spent all of her money, so now she's not only just sick and bleeding, she is poor and destitute. This woman with the issue of blood, this discharge of blood for 12 years, is quite sick. She's quite ill. But it's not just that she's sick, she's outcast. She is unclean. This was quite significant in the Jewish faith, to be clean or to be unclean. The law of Moses had much to say about this. I want us to look just at a few verses from the book of Leviticus. Leviticus chapter 15. I think our audience is old enough this evening. If a woman has a discharge of blood for many days, not at the time of her menstrual impurity, or if she has a discharge beyond the time of her impurity, all the days of her discharge she shall continue in uncleanness. As in the days of her impurity she shall be unclean. Every bed on which she lies all the days of her discharge shall be to her as the bed of her impurity. And everything on which she sits shall be unclean, as in the uncleanness of her menstrual impurity. And whoever touches these things shall be unclean, and shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the evening. Sometimes you may have heard verses like this before and think, why are these things in the Bible? They did, of course, serve an important purpose. This was given through the law of Moses while the people are in the wilderness, wandering through the desert, and there's a lot of disease that goes on. They're in close proximity. There's not a lot of medical care and physicians in the desert and the wilderness. And so these skin diseases it talks a lot about and these blood issues are quite significant that they can't spread through the people. So why are these in the Bible? It's for these important reasons. You couldn't have blood issues spreading through the people in the camp, and you couldn't have skin disorders like leprosy working their way through the camp. That's why the Old Testament law mentions many of these diseases, but it sticks with the culture of the people, and this idea of being clean or unclean stays with them beyond just the wilderness. And so this woman, as we've read in this law, is unclean. She's unclean day after day after day. Not just for a few days, not just for a few weeks or a few months or even a few years. For 12 years, this woman has been unclean, pushed aside into society, pushed to the edges. She has not had children during this time, we know. And if she has a husband, we don't know if she had one or not, he would have left her a long time ago. He could not touch her. He could not be with her. She was unclean. Any friends that she may have had are probably long gone. She probably has no one. I want us to see the position of this woman who is just utterly broken at the end of her rope with nowhere to go, unclean every day for 12 years. She can't interact with anybody. You know, humanity, we are designed, psychologists tell us that we desire and we need touch, human touch. A hug or a high five, a pat on the back. We need physical touch, and when we lack it, things begin to go wrong. It moves from just a physical disease, it becomes something that's mental. Many times in my life, I've come across people that were stricken with homelessness for whatever reason. These people that lack human touch often, that lack healthy dialogue and conversation often, and over time they become poor at both of those things, and they're having trouble talking with you, they're having trouble interacting with you, they want to look down, they don't respect themselves. There's mental things that come. Maybe you've experienced a similar thing. This woman is feeling all of this stuff because she cannot touch anyone. No one can even touch the things that she has touched. Blood is a complex thing. In the Bible, it symbolizes life. Blood is life. It's the life flowing through our veins as God intended it to do so. This was God's idea. I didn't come up with blood. This was God's plan, that blood would be our life force flowing through our veins. When Cain kills Abel, it says the blood of Abel cries out to God, a life crying out for justice to God. When animals are sacrificed, their blood is sprinkled on the altar. It's to symbolize the life of the animal, the life that is given. Blood equals life in the Scriptures. And yet, of course, we all know that blood is also so much associated with death. War with blood, and violence with blood, loss with blood. When we see blood and it is escaping from where it is supposed to be, things are not going well. And blood is associated, of course, with life, but at the same time with death. You know, I've shared some of our story, my wife and I's story over the years. We have 4 wonderful children, beautiful children. You've probably seen them running around the hallways here. And man, we are blessed by our 4 kids. At the same time of our 4 pregnancies that led to 4 healthy children, Jessalyn went through 4 miscarriages that did not end in healthy pregnancies. And you remember, you take the test and you get the 2 lines, or nowadays I think they just say pregnant. It just comes out and tells you. And you're excited, and it's like, man, there's this new life that's coming, like a new life that's going to be added to your family, and you're excited for the nursery, and you're getting new stuff, and you're going to tell your friends and family, and this is just excitement of a new life. All of these things are coming. You're thinking about your siblings or your kids you already have, and the siblings that they're going to have, younger sisters, younger brothers. Your family is growing. All these emotions going through your head. It's all wonderful, and then you see the blood. I don't mean to be overly graphic, but you see the blood. And the blood is death. It's death. It's loss. It's devastation. It's pain. It's blood. And that feeling, and there's women here that have walked through that before, that are walking through that now, that maybe will walk through that in the future. And as a man, I don't claim to be able to fully sympathize with you, but I imagine the pain that is going through that moment. This is what this woman has been dealing with for 12 years. The pain and loss and association with death of the blood that is upon her, and she has nothing that she can do about it. And so she has to get to Jesus. It's crowded. There's a crowd also trying to get to Jesus, and she somehow works her way amongst her pain and her struggle to reach out to touch Jesus in the crowd, and she touches just the hem, it says, of his garment, the bottom of his robe, the bottom of his cloak, the bottom of his clothes. She touches the garment, and in that moment, this miraculous thing happens. She can't explain it, but she feels it in her own body. This says the blood dries up immediately. And no one else would know on the outside, but she feels that she has been healed in a moment, just from touching the hem of Jesus' garment. And Jesus stops. And Jesus asks such a great question. He's walking through the crowd and he stops and he says, "Who touched me?" His disciples are confused. They've been playing like bodyguard the whole way, like trying to excuse us. We're trying to get Jesus through here. He's on his way to perform a miracle. Let us through. His disciples are dumbfounded. They look at Jesus and say, "Jesus, everyone has touched you. Everyone is touching you right now. There's 100 people we can see right now that are touching you, pressing in on you. What do you mean? Who touched you, Jesus? And Jesus says, I felt power come out of me. That'll be a sermon for another time, because there's a lot there. I felt power come out of me, out of his clothes. And Jesus sensed it. Who touched me? Now, here's what's beautiful about the story. If we're just able to dig in a little further, a little deeper. This woman reached out and touched the bottom hem fringe of what was likely Jesus' prayer shawl. Rabbis would wear these prayer shawls. I have a picture I want you to see of one. There we are. Long rectangular like this, oftentimes colors of these blue and golds. They would wear them around their shoulders and they hang down in front. Sometimes they'd pull them over their head, but oftentimes they would wear them in this way. Jesus, as a rabbi, very likely had one of these on. And on the edges of these, there's these fringes, these tassels. We've talked about it before. It's called tzitzit. You want to say that one together? It's a tough one. T-Z-I-T-Z-I-T. Tzitzit. Let's do it again. 1, 2, 3. Tzitzit. It's a whole different language. It's hard to say some of those words. And tzitzit was on the fringe edge of the garment. It was also something they might wrap around their wrists and hold together as they prayed. It symbolized many different things. A lot of symbolism in the Jewish faith, with these colors and the numbers and the different tassels and all the stuff, and they would be on the fringe of the garments. In the Old Testament, in the final chapter of the Old Testament, we're told that the Son of Righteousness would come with healing in its wings. The word for wings there is a Hebrew word, kanaf. We're learning one more Hebrew word today, kanaf. Let's say that together. 1, 2, 3. Kanaf means wings. It also means the hem or the edge. And so rabbis were often, it was talked about when they had these prayer shawls, they could hold them out this way and it would look as though they had wings. And so these fringes, these kanaf on the edge, were the wings of the rabbi, and there's healing in the wings. And this woman reaches up to the Son of Righteousness to touch his wings, and she receives healing, a prophecy fulfilled. The Old Testament is not done, it's fulfilled in Jesus. I love this. I encourage you to go read further on that. There's a lot more cool stuff you can study about that. The wings, the kanaf, as this woman touches the hem of Jesus' garment and is healed. And so Jesus says, who touched me? Now this woman could have just kind of hidden away. She's disturbed this rabbi. It says she comes before him with fear and trembling. She's interrupted. She's but a woman and she is unclean. She's touched this rabbi, which is strictly forbidden. But she stands before Jesus and says, it was me. It was I. And what does this rabbi Jesus say? Again, I love Jesus. Do you love Jesus? What does Jesus say? Mark chapter 5, verse 34. And he said to her, daughter, this is our first daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. Jesus wasn't mad at her. Jesus was not upset. Daughter, go in faith. You have been made well. She is healed from her disease. In this same moment, someone comes from the other side of town and shouts out to Jairus, who, if you forget, this is who Jesus was actually with, going to heal his daughter. And he shouts out to Jairus, Jairus, your daughter has died. You did not make it soon enough. Let's not bother the teacher anymore. You can tell Jesus he can go about his business. Nothing left to do here. She's no longer sick. She has died. And Jesus looks right in Jairus' face, and I love what Jesus says. He says, do not fear, only believe. Do not fear, only believe. I want you to hold on to that fear again and that believe again. Hold on to that. We're going to come back to it. Do not fear, Jairus, only believe. And so then Jesus, along with Jairus, and he gets 3 of his disciples, Peter, James, and John, 3 of the inner circle, and they leave the crowd. They make their way through town. They get to Jairus' house finally, and outside there's this scene of weeping and wailing and mourning, which is very accustomed to the culture in the Jewish city there in Capernaum. Crying out for this poor girl who has died far, far, far too young. And Jesus says, why all the commotion? She is not dead, but she is sleeping. Man, I would love to hear some of these times Jesus says these things. Like, how does that come across? He would say something similar later on about Lazarus, his friend, by the way, which we talked about recently. Lazarus has this disease, and he says, this disease does not lead unto death. And then he says, let's go wake him up. He tells these people that she's not dead, she's but asleep. Of course, they laugh at Jesus because they know that she is, in fact, dead. They've seen death before. They're quite familiar, and she has died. So Jesus goes into the room with this young girl, 12 years old, on her bed, and she has died. This is what Jesus does. Mark chapter 5, verse 41. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, Talitha cumi, which means, little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age, and they were immediately overcome with amazement. Of course they were. Jesus heals this young girl, not just heals, he raises her from the dead, wakes her from her sleep of death, and brings her back to life, heals this young girl. He tells the people there to give her something to eat, and he tells them not to tell anyone else. It's not quite time for Jesus to be famous at that level. Don't tell anyone else, he says. 2 daughters healed, restored by Jesus. Amen? Now, I want us to, before we close, consider a few things. There's some significant things that I want us to just ponder of these 2 stories. In Jewish culture, clean and unclean was a big deal. To be clean or to be unclean was a huge importance of your life, and you were always trying to not interact with something that was unclean because you would become unclean. You didn't eat certain things, you didn't touch certain things, you didn't interact with certain people, you didn't go to certain places. To be clean or to be unclean. This was very important, and it was symbolic. It was ritualistic. It was ceremonially unclean. We're not talking of physical dirt, but to be clean or to be unclean was a significant importance in the Jewish faith. This bleeding woman was unclean. This dead girl was unclean. The woman with her issue of blood, the dead body, which you're not supposed to touch in the Jewish faith. You don't touch blood, you don't touch death. Both would make you unclean ceremonially, where you cannot interact with others, where you were deemed unfit. And any good rabbi would have stayed far away from blood or from death, because a good rabbi knows he's supposed to remain clean before God. And Jesus still touches both of these daughters. He touches the dead girl by the hand. He's touched by the woman with the issue of blood on his garment. Both would have made Jesus, the rabbi, unclean. Both would have made any other human in the history of the world unclean, according to the people, according to the law and the tradition. But Jesus does not become unclean. Jesus makes them clean. He does not take on their impurity, their uncleanness. He rather takes his cleanness, and it comes off of him onto the people, onto these 2 women, to bring healing to them. This is what's known as redemption. This is Jesus redeeming what is lost and broken and sick and diseased. It's a sign pointing to the hopeful resurrection that we long for. It's this moment. And Jesus, what I love is that he sends us into the world to do the same thing. To bring clean what is unclean. To bring hope to what is in despair, to bring light into what is dark, to bring love into what is hate, to bring redemption into the world. Jesus so sends us in the same way. There's a story a few days after the resurrection. We're in the season of Easter. Jesus would appear to his disciples again there in the upper room. I want you to think about this as their safe room. They are hiding out in fear. Jesus has just been crucified, and so they're wondering, are we next? With good reason. Are we next? And they're hiding out in fear, great fear of the world that is around them. And Jesus appears in their midst. He doesn't knock on the door or even walk through the door. Jesus is the door, by the way, but Jesus just appears in the room to them. And I want us to see what Jesus says. John chapter 20, verse 21. After the resurrection, appearing to the disciples, Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, even so I am sending you." This is what he tells the disciples. Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you. And he tells this to a group of disciples that are hiding out in fear in a locked room. Now, had Jesus made the Roman Empire any more safe for them? No. It was not safe. They had put Jesus to death. But Jesus is still sending these disciples, sending you and I out from our safe, locked room of fear and of trembling, sending us out into a world filled with, guess what? Uncleanness. And there is a type of Christianity, if we want to hold to this, that says let's stay in our locked room, stay away from all of them, all of that stuff that's going to infect me, it's going to get me unclean. And we live in fear of those things, keep our distance from anything that may be unclean. There's a Christianity, there's a way that we can be drawn to live that way, but I want us in this Easter season to hear Jesus say, I want to send you in the same way the Father sent me. Not into safety, but in peace out into the world filled with brokenness and loss and hurt and real struggle and real pain. And that we would in some way, as we're connected to Jesus, not of our own strength, but in some way bring healing to the world around us. It's what the church is to model. That we bring healing, that we don't become infected and become unclean because we interact with the world, but that we bring the hope and the cleanliness of Jesus upon the world that is so sick. It's what we're called to do. Do not fear, Jesus says, only believe. I cannot guarantee you that things won't go wrong, that you won't experience loss or pain, but I can promise you that Jesus will be with you every single step of the way to bring healing to what is broken. And so he sends us.